Thank you. Did I pass, Ben? Am I good? All right, good evening, everyone. Oh, come on. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Before I get started, let's have a word of prayer. Father God, thank you so much for life, health, and strength. Thank you for this group of young people who are excited about their careers and where they are. We just ask that you speak to them in a special way and you guide them and help them to learn something new. In your name we do pray. Amen. By way of introduction, I'm going to start this way, just a little bit about myself. I am a very regimented person, for those who don't know me. I like things in an exact way. I'm pretty predictable. I'm not that exciting, I'll be honest with you. And every morning, and actually even though I wasn't home, I still kept my routine. I like to stop at my happy place. You may have a happy place. You may share this happy place. I had to stop at Starbucks. I had to stop. You laugh, but every morning I stop at Starbucks. And to be honest, I'm not really a coffee drinker. I drink Starbucks. There's a difference. I don't want the Keurig stuff. I don't want the Dunkin' Donuts. No, I go to Starbucks. And honestly, I don't know sure what it is. Maybe you guys could figure this out. There's something about that overpriced cup of liquid that makes me keep going back. But what keeps me going back even more is the great experience I receive. I enjoy when I walk in and my neighborhood Starbucks, they know my name even before I walk in. Hey, Pierre, how's it going? I'm like, good to see you, Stacy. They always like to make small talk. And as they're making my drink, regardless of the line, even when I do a mobile order, high tech, they still want to make small talk. I like that tie. Good to see you. I'm like, this old thing, you're so kind. But when I think about Starbucks and how they formulated a multi-billion-dollar empire on one piece of their value system, is that they know people will keep coming back if they have a pleasant experience. Even today, I ordered a drink, and it wasn't to my liking, and guess what the barista said? With a smile, I'll make you another one. How was your drink, Pierre? And I was like, man, that made me feel good. And I had to think about the Starbucks experience that helps me find my true center as I work in healthcare. Because if Starbucks, as they sell coffee, understands the importance of experience, how much more important is it in healthcare that when people step foot in our facilities to understand, you know what, we want to make sure that everyone leaves here with a pleasant experience. And that's why I do what I do every single day. That's why I'm in healthcare operations. And unlike some of you, and I got to go around and meet many of you, sounds like you have your futures figured out. But literally 11 years ago, I sat where you were sitting. And not to sound like a cliche, I did theology and I did business, and the theology majors looked at me like I was crazy, and the business people like, are you sure you're in the right place? And I took this class, business seminar. And it was amazing because as God led in my life, I knew that I was passionate about working with people. I knew that I was passionate about working with problems, fixing things, just kind of how my brain was wired. And I didn't know where I wanted to go. I'll be honest. I was involved on campus. I was involved in a local church, Orchard Park, not too far from here. And I was having great experiences, but they were saying, what do you want to do when you grow up, Pierre? And I could not answer that question. So I did the traditional route. I interviewed with conferences. Lo and behold, I end up in Oklahoma. Anyone know what Oklahoma is? I didn't know. I got a job offer to go work in Oklahoma. I didn't even know where Oklahoma was. I'll be honest. I was like, Tulsa, Oklahoma? But God was moving and leading, and God said, Pierre, I need you to go. I graduated 21 years old, senior pastor in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't share that to give kudos to myself. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was open to God's leading, and God put me in a perfect situation where I had a group of elders, a group of business leaders who said, Pierre, listen to me. We'll help you. We'll use your strength. We'll work together, and we will lead this church. As I was there, I started learning about healthcare. To be honest, my father's a pediatrician. He is till this day. My mother was his office manager in his practice. And to be honest, even at 21 years old, all I knew about healthcare was that you could be a doctor or you could be a nurse, and you'll take care of the patients. This whole non-clinical side, this operation side, was foreign to me at 21 years old. And I said, you mean I could work in a hospital and not see blood and needles? You mean I could work in a hospital and bring value to patients because of how I like to do process improvement and solve problems. And I started my MBA at Oklahoma State. And I said, you know what? I'm not sure where God's going to lead, but I want to be part of healthcare somehow. As I continued at Oklahoma, I was there for 2 years. I decided to come back home. Home is West Palm Beach, Florida. Went to Forest Lake Academy. My father had kidney failure. He's doing much better today. Wanted to be closer to home. And 1 year, as I was teaching freshman Bible and working on a marketing plan for the school, I get a call from Adventist Health System from a former elder of mine who says, you know what, I heard that you may be interested in healthcare. I said, why? I'm not sure how you knew that, but sure, why not? This must be just God wanting to speak to me. And they said, you know what, we're going to put you in this residency program, and we want you to learn a few things. And I'll be honest, at this time, 23 years old, I thought I knew it all. It's like, me, be an intern? What do I have to learn? I'm okay. I'm going to finish my MBA and figure this out. Lord, humble me and say, Pierre, just listen. That was probably the next best 10 months of my life, learning as much as I could in healthcare from an administration standpoint, and then finally into healthcare recruitment. I went into human resources, and 7 years later, God continued to bless and allow me to have more responsibility. But I say, as I stand before you as an alumni, that the first thing is following God's leading, but one of the most important things were the power of relationships every step of the way. The Bible verse is true. You know, God gave me a small piece of responsibility, and I had to do that with the best of my ability. I didn't have everything figured out, but guess what? God said, Pierre, you're a pastor. You need to be the best pastor you can be and connect with people and save people. And people say all the time, Pierre, how does it feel to leave full-time ministry? But guess what? Ministry as Christians is something we do every single day, regardless of the industry that you're in. I have not left full-time ministry. My paycheck doesn't come from the conference. But guess what? Every single day, everyone I come in contact with, I have an opportunity to represent our kingdom and to bring souls closer to Christ. And I challenge that wherever industry you find yourself in to make sure you never lose sight of that. So what I want to do for a few moments, and I want to be very transparent, I want to give you a high-level overview of what does it mean when you hear healthcare operations. Because to be honest, I didn't know this stuff when I was 21, 22 years old, and share some insights on a few departments that you typically wouldn't think of when you think of a hospital, and how they intertwine and work together to help patients have a great experience. Front desk registration, as simple as it sounds, I work with a team every day to ensure we have an intentional plan for everyone that steps foot in our campus. They're not just a smiling face to say, hello, how you doing? They're collecting key information from when it comes to insurances, demographic information, so we know, number one, who has stepped onto our campus and how do we funnel them to the right areas of care. Now, when you think about that, we're not charging on the front end, but we need to know, is this person self-pay so we could give them the right resources? Do they have insurance? And not only is it insurance, do they have an insurance provider that we carry? Because the conversations look different. Not to discriminate, but to let them know, full disclosure, because of your payer mix, this is what you're going to be paying, so we have full transparency. And anytime there's a disconnect, so we can say, hey, guess what? This is probably the best area you should go to, so you can get the best level of care for your price point. And we try to keep them within the Florida hospital system. In conjunction with our front registration desk, I think I mixed up here, and I'll go back to this, the emergency department registration that may be a little more familiar. So the front desk was the main front desk of the hospital. This is your emergency department. You have an emergency, you think you broke your leg, you think you're having a heart attack, you're going to the emergency department. And before you see a nurse, before you see a physician, you're going to see the front person, an individual at the registration desk. And again, they're also collecting pertinent information in terms of insurance, what's going on, but they work in conjunction. There will typically be a security officer sitting next to that individual, and also there will be a clinical person like a nurse tech or a registered nurse. Why? Based on your emergency, they could triage you or take you to the right area of care right away. Now, just to give you some insight, some of the daily issues that we work with when it comes to the front desk registration is how we can do so efficiently. Florida Hospital Altamonte, where I work as the chief operating officer, we're averaging about 95,000 visits a year through our emergency department. And we only have 36 beds. So for my finance majors, how many visits a day is that? 95,000 divided by 365. 260. So we average each day anywhere from 245 to 265 visits a day. So there's a team that's daily watching these numbers to see, all right, how are we going to take care of 245 patients a day coming through our emergency department on 36 beds, and it's a 24/7 operation. And that's the whole team, and we gather that information. Now, the easiest solution is saying, oh, let's make sure we have 15 people at the front to welcome them in. Let's make sure we have 50 doctors and 50 nurses. But in the real world, you realize there's a thing called a budget, and we have to be efficient with our budget. And I get to work with that team every day to figure that piece out. So that's just the front desk of the emergency department. An area that gets overlooked is guest services. Again, I talked about experience. And at Florida Hospital Altamonte, we've been blessed by not only a lot of volume coming to our hospital, but people saying, you know what, if I had a choice and I had to go elsewhere, I still wouldn't go elsewhere. I want to come back to Florida Hospital Altamonte. So that's a good problem to have. You want to have volume. You want people to continue to come back to your organization. So we decided to form a team called Guest Services that helps what we like to call connecting the dots while you're here in our hospital. So for example, you've gone through the emergency department. You weren't planning on being here. You may have some disconnect, not sure how you're going to get home. You're not sure how you can connect with your loved ones to find out. We have a team dedicated to going room by room to see, hey, what can we do to ease your mind while you are here so you can have a pleasant experience? And as simple as that sounds, it goes a long way for individuals that come and say, you know what, I'm supposed to get discharged tomorrow. I have no idea how I'm going to get home. One of the cool projects I got to work with recently is that, hey, we're having an issue with discharges. A patient has come into our hospital. They're ready to go home, but they have no way to go home, and they have to wait till 6 o'clock for mom or dad or someone to come pick them up. So we actually said, you know what, let's find out what are some options to help these individuals out. So we set up a meeting with Uber Corporate and Lyft and said, hey, how can we form a contract so that we can have an account when someone's ready to go home, they sign consent, and there's an Uber driver ready to take them home, all right? And guess what? The sooner they get out of the hospital, what does that mean for someone waiting in the lobby? That they can come into the hospital, that lengthens our length of stay and enhances that experience. So again, more healthcare operations that you normally don't think about, but this guest services team gets to be on the front lines of that. Another area, nutritional services. Now, when you go to a hospital, some people may say, oh, the food stinks or the food's great. Now, this is two areas when it comes to operations that we're referring to here. The front of the house is retail, going to the cafeteria, getting a salad and ordering a pizza if you're visiting a loved one. But there's also the dietitian side and the nutritional service attendants that deliver food to patients. That may sound simple, but here are some of the intricacies. That every patient has a different diet order. So if they have a cardiac, they're having cardiac issues, they need to have a low sodium diet. And if they're having, if they have some health restrictions based on their diagnosis, they can't pick items off of a long buffet list. But we still, before every mealtime, we're going to patient rooms saying, what would you like to eat today? And they have different orders, and we have to submit those orders, fill out a tray, and make sure they get their food on time. So an example of a project that happens every so often is, how do we figure out and make sure every patient is eating in the necessary window so that they can then receive their meds so that they can get better so then they can leave. So recently, probably about 2 years ago, we were realizing, hey, we're having a lot of volume. Our patient meal time should be between the hours of 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. But as we looked at the numbers, some people weren't getting their meals until 1:30, 1:45. Now you may say, that's not a big deal, just warm it up, they'll be fine. But the diabetic who needs to take medicine at a certain time is now receiving a late tray, and now that experience not only is being negatively impacted, their care is suffering. So we had to put a team together to figure out, hey, you know what, this isn't part of our expectation for patients. So we had to do a construction project to redo our kitchen to add an additional tray line so that we could produce more trays per minute, per hour, to decrease that window of meal time so that every patient could receive their meal in the ample amount of time. Again, we don't think about this typically, but behind the scenes, these are the people that make that happen for every single patient. The next area, as simple as it sounds, patient transport is key to everyday operations. And it's just like the name suggests. They are moving patients from point A to point B. But like I said, we're seeing almost how many patients a day? About 260 patients a day. Guess what? I don't have 260 transporters. So we have to be efficient with our resources and have a plan of attack, not just every month, every week, every single day. How do we move patients from the emergency department up to the rooms, from the room to the imaging scans, from the imaging scans back to the room, and keep almost a turn wheel every single day going on. And sometimes in a recent real life scenario, we had to deal with patient transport. There's lots of competition happening in Central Florida. Something came to my desk, Pierre. The hospital down the street, they're paying patient transporters $2 an hour more than we are here at Florida Hospital. What are we going to do? So the easy response is, let's pay them $2. Let's pay them $3 more, all right, so they can stay. But after analysis, we made a decision at the time saying, you know what? We're staying pretty firm with our rate because we're matching the average, but let's make sure we're sitting down with our employees and asking them how they enjoy working for our organization. And if anyone at risk of leaving because of this hike in wages across the street. And believe it or not, we were very blessed and fortunate. Almost every single patient transporter said, you know what? They may be paying $2 more, but we heard horror stories about the competitors. We enjoy working for Florida Hospital. We're going to stay because guess what? We have an opportunity to learn and grow. Now, I'm not saying that we're against paying people more. We're meeting industry averages, but the importance of connecting with people, understanding, hey, you know what? We need to listen to what's happening in the environment and have a connection and relationship with our patients, with our employees, so that we can stay relevant and that they can stay with our organization. The operating room, probably one of my more exciting areas, and that probably sounds a little crazy because I can't stand blood. I don't like needles. But when it comes to healthcare operations, the operating room, this is where all the surgeries happen. All right, it's very important from an operator standpoint to understand what goes on every single day when it comes to different cases. Now, Florida Hospital Altamonte, for years, we only had 4 operating rooms. So think about it. You go through the emergency department, all right, you broke your arm. Or better yet, your parent or a loved one broke their hip. And we're saying, all right, we need to schedule a surgery. It's an emergency. Let's get it taken care of. Somebody in the community goes to their primary physician, say, you know what, you've been experiencing a lot of pain. You probably need to get a hip replacement or a knee replacement. We were having issues because we only had 4 operating rooms, and we had so much volume coming in where some people had to wait almost 6 weeks before they could get their surgery scheduled because we didn't have any capacity, nor did we have enough physicians. So my team, we had to put a plan together and figure out, all right, what are the areas that we're trying to target? All right, what's the growth happening in this community in X amount of time? All right, we need to have an ortho plan, ortho doctors that work on bones. We need to hire some aggressive, really good physicians that do orthopedics, and we have to add more operating rooms so that we can take care of the community. And again, we wouldn't know that information without speaking to the consumers and looking at numbers to understand, hey, how can we make sure our operating room runs efficiently and we're taking care of the needs of the physicians. Now today, by God's grace, we have 10 operating rooms at Altamonte, and we stay at about 75% capacity, or utilization rather, and that's very exciting. Human resources. I like to call them the unsung heroes that sit in the background. You're only as strong and only as effective as the people you hire. Human resources doesn't just hire and fire, but I look to my human resources team to make sure, you know what, we're hiring the right people and we're keeping the right people. We have a culture of service at Florida Hospital, and we want to make sure that we're not just hiring people that just want a job. We're not just hiring a warm body. We want to make sure that all the initiatives that we are aligned to as a not-for-profit Christian healthcare system aligns with everyone. Now, I'll be very honest. We're part of Adventist health system. We don't hire just Adventists. All right, honestly, my team of leaders, of about 75 leaders for a 400-bed hospital, is probably only 10% Adventists. So when you think about those numbers, okay, now the executive team the C-suite level, based on our board mandates and the philosophy of our company, will always be Adventist. But you have an Adventist C-suite team of 3 or 4, all right, leading an entire, and we have 2,200 employees, okay, being led by non-Adventist leaders. Now, they all understand the mission of the hospital, and they have vowed and they support the hospital and its mission. But, you know, when you talk about culture, that's a very sensitive topic, and it's you have to be very, very intentional. So some of the real discussions that we have is making sure, hey, we're meeting expectations from a business standpoint, but we're not wavering on our principles. All right, we do not do anything that's elective from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. All right, office work, guess what? It is a mandate that office work stops at 4:30. It doesn't really get to 5 o'clock most times during the year because of sunset, and we don't serve pork or anything that does not fall in line with our health message from a denominational standpoint. But when it comes to culture, human resources helps us mitigate those things, and it gives us guidance to know where we should be, what part of the industry we should be targeting when it comes to that. Laboratory, probably one of my least favorite areas because I hate blood, but they're very, very important when it comes to operations. So when you go to the hospital and you're admitted, you're in an inpatient room, all right, there are certain times during that stay, in order for the physician to make a diagnosis, they have to do what? They have to draw your blood. All right, so one of the real life scenarios that happen from the operation standpoint, okay, is, hey, you know, physicians are wanting the lab results by 7:30 a.m., so while they're doing their rounds, they could make the proper assessment so they could discharge a patient to go home. So what was the number one feedback we were getting from people? In order to get fresh lab by 7 a.m., we had to go into the rooms between 1 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. so that the physicians could have the information they needed. Patient was saying, why are they waking me up middle of the night? Someone that I don't know is knocking on the door, coming in and pulling blood out my veins. And when it comes to patient experience, you get paid and reimbursed by patient experience scores. So we want to make sure we're listening to the voice of the consumer. So we had to make a fundamental switch literally about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we said, you know what, we're not going to have lab techs go into the rooms to draw blood. All right, we're going to have the nurses at the bedside draw blood and give them a understanding of the why, communicate with that patient, hey, just so you know, all right, just to get you out of here on time, I may have to wake you up at 1 o'clock, but guess what? It'll be me. You know me. I'll tap you. Which light should I use? How do you want me to wake you up so I can grab your labs, draw your blood so we can get your lab results in so the physician can make an assessment so you can leave on time. So those small things go a long way, changing processes. And honestly, through that process, if we needed less lab techs, what did that mean from an operation standpoint? There were less hours for lab techs, and that means there were less positions for those lab techs. So we could have easily sent an email or a communication out saying, you're right, you no longer have a job. But because people matter, we say, you know what, let's make sure we do the right thing, give them ample notice, and find the right place in the organization where we can reallocate some of these resources, because they do have value, but the process had to change in order for us to meet the needs of the patients. So that's kind of definitely a real life scenario there. And the last area I want to kind of highlight is imaging. Imaging is a fun area because every patient that comes through needs to get some sort of imaging scan, whether it's an MRI, a CT scan. Most recently, we added a second true beam when it came to radiation oncology for cancer patients. So you've been diagnosed with cancer, and you're giving a prescription or a treatment plan of radiation. So we had individuals who needed treatment for cancer, for radiation, that had to wait almost 3 months before they could come in because we had no capacity on our true beam. And a true beam is a high-tech special piece of equipment that allows the physician to locate where the cancerous cells are, and instead of damaging healthy tissue, it localizes on the tissue that's harmful, and it really just zaps it and under less treatment. So because it's less treatments, less radiation, it's very popular. And we had to make it a call saying, hey, we have a long wait list to take care of the community. We need to invest $6 million to this new piece of equipment so that we can help the community, all right? And the return on investment will speak for itself, but those are the decisions that we need to make sure we have the right imaging equipment to take care of the needs in the community. Now, inside the hospital as well, again, Any given day, we're having 265 patients coming through. Patient transport, imaging, and the operations team must work together to say, hey, what are the high times? What are the low times? How do we staff effectively to make the right decisions to get patients through every single day? So I say all this just to give you a crash course of healthcare operations. And you guys are a lot smarter than I was. I had no idea there was a world outside of doctors and nurses. And when I found out that this could be a career path for me, I said, sign me up, let me learn more about it. But to be honest, just like any industry, the industry continues to evolve. There's going to be changes. Every day in Congress, as they pass different pieces of legislation, guess what? Hospitals are being asked to do more with less resources, to do more with less financial resources. And as healthcare operators, guess what? The job never ends, and something's always changing and always evolving. But what doesn't change is that in order to be on the front end of any industry change, it's connected with people. Understanding, hey, how do we know what the people want? We must ask the people. And to be transparent, because I feel like I'm home, and I was an alumni, and I was a student just like you all, but not as smart or that well dressed. I used to come in here with basketball shorts from intramurals, but I'm glad you guys look very sharp. I'm just being honest. I learned a lot, and I'll be honest that I'm only 32 years old, but I made a lot of mistakes. And what I'll leave you with, just some lessons on leadership. Whether you're in healthcare operations or leadership in any other industry, don't be afraid to admit your mistakes. One mistake that I made earlier on, because I still have a lot to learn, was understanding what empathy really meant. So it was easy for me to sit around a table, sit at the front seat of the table, and tell the team, all right, this is the problem, this is what we're going to do. And it was interesting that if you ask for feedback, be careful what you ask for. Because oftentimes, especially in this generation, people will give you feedback. And we got feedback early on. I was a director of operations at the time. And we got feedback that the administration team didn't know what they were doing. And when they said the administration team, they meant the people in the executive office. And when they said people in the executive office, there's only two people. The COO, the director of operations, we had to figure this out because the CEO is a lot more front-facing in the community, having discussions on how to grow. So the operators were in there making these decisions. And I prayed about it. I said, man, I'm trying to learn. I want to climb the ranks. I want to make sure I'm an effective leader. And I had to get off I'm going to be honest, my high horse. And I had to get closer to the front line. Because, yes, I was making decisions, but I never transported a patient. I was making decisions. I never cleaned a patient room. So what did I do? Myself and my team, we put on scrubs and we started transporting patients. Not for the photo op, not because it looked good for Instagram and for Snapchat, but we did so we could work alongside the experts and say, talk to me, why do you do this the way you're doing it? Why are you pushing the patient this way instead of going the other hallway? Why are you using this bag versus that bag? Or when you sat next to the desk and realized, hey, we told them they can only have one person working there from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. because middle of the night everybody's sleeping. No, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. was one of the busiest times through the emergency department. And having one person sitting there because people wouldn't come during the day because they didn't have a ride to the emergency department. They waited for their loved ones to come home from work. They'll have dinner. Then they'll go to the emergency department and have the long wait. So I was able to get a closer and a better understanding when I got to the front lines. And I have to be very intentional. My day could easily be filled with meetings and more meetings and more meetings. But I had to be very intentional with my team to say, you know what? We're going to take the suits and ties off. We're going to put scrubs on, and we're going to learn and walk alongside our frontline employees. And those are the real experts. When physicians are arguing about different processes, instead of me sitting at a table trying to act like I know what they're talking about, I put on scrubs and I watch surgeries. And I'll be honest, it's tough for me because I hate looking at blood. But when I'm able to put self aside and say, all right, I've noticed a few things. Now, you see things on both sides that there's some exaggerations. And you can see the truth when you're right in front of things happening. Then you can offer suggestions. And believe it or not, because they see me in scrubs looking funny and oversized, booties on for my feet and the hairnets on. They're like, what are you doing here? What are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. I say, you're right. That's why we're here. And you'll be surprised the feedback we get. And as we make decisions, we're saying, hey, let's make sure we have a few other people in the room before we change this process because they are on the front lines. And you'll be surprised that every project we've gone to that we try to make sure we understood what the real experts on the team were experiencing, and that helped me a long way. Another thing is to understand a leadership lesson. I'm just going over some leadership lessons that I've learned I want to share for you. When you fail, just fail fast because you're going to fail, okay? I realize fail fast. Don't just sit there, I made a mistake, all right, let me ride this out. No, if a process doesn't work, all right, let it go. Bring the team back and say, let's figure this out. This is not working. We're not experiencing the savings that we wanted to, and it's okay. And it's amazing how even my bosses are saying, all right, that didn't work out. We're not worried about what doesn't work. Let's focus on what does work. Fail fast. And the last thing I would share is continue being a learner. Now, it's probably easy for me to say because I'm a big nerd, but learning with something I learned from the School of Business here happens every single day. You'll be surprised that it's not just what's happening on the course curriculum when it comes to your syllabus, but what's happening in current events is very important. All right, what's happening in the business world is very important. All right, and what's happening overseas literally is affecting day-to-day decisions in every industry. So when you are a learner, you are always keeping abreast of what's going on in current events and making sure, guess what, you can understand, hey, where the industry is going, because the industries and the leaders that stay ahead by reading become your most effective leaders. And I'm saying that not because I found that out for myself, but I've worked alongside some very, very impressive leaders, and they said the same thing, and reading as much as possible really helps that. Now, with technology, now we have different ways to read information, but please, there's things you can read that interest you, but stay close to current events, especially if you see yourself in a leadership position in the future, because you're working alongside of different demographics, you're working alongside people of different ages, and if you can't connect and understand what they're going through, you're going to have a hard time leading. Like, for example, I know one of the very toughest things I had to do early on in my career is, and we shared this over dinner, I had to communicate a reduction in force, a firing, for people who are older than me, people who've been at the company longer than I have. And how do you extend the healing ministry of Christ, all right, and how do you tell someone, all right, with a clear face that you no longer have a job and they've been doing the job for so long? But I had to lean on people and say, you know what, this is really uncomfortable. I need some tips to understand this. And I could still do so. I had to learn to do so by keeping their dignity. Yes, I was a messenger, but the way I communicated the message and what we did after that, is there an opportunity to save these people's talents and to put them elsewhere? We don't have to do that, but I felt that's the right thing to do because of the organization we work for and the goal of what we're trying to do. So that's just a few things that, as I wrote down, I wanted to share with you from a leadership standpoint. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Okay, all right. So I want to stop here for some Q&A because, again, I know that not everyone here is going to end up in healthcare. I heard lots of different majors and backgrounds as I went through the room, and I want to encourage you as you look to your future. But stay open. Stay open. You may have a plan today. Like myself, I did not plan 10 years ago I was going to be where I'm at today. Honestly, 5 years ago, if you asked me where I was going to be, I would not say here as a chief operating officer. But being open to God's leading, understanding that we are all in ministry as Christians and we're representing Christ every single day, that should always be at the forefront of our minds. So I want to take a few questions. I'm not sure what's the process. Let's take hands. All right, I saw a hand trying to come up over there. Yes, sir.
Yeah, do you ever find that working in a system that is blatantly Christian, people expect you to be more lenient on them as brothers and sisters in Christ?
Very good question. Everybody hear that? Do I feel that working for a Christian organization, do people expect us to be more lenient? So kind of yes and no. So I'll be honest, in my experience, I probably have more issues with Adventists than with anybody else. And it's not just about leniency of rules. It's just hey, I'm Adventist. I see you at church, so we should be homeboys and buddies. So what's up? What do you mean? You got to do your job. What do you want me to do for you? So understanding that, yes, there is a connection, and it can get awkward because, I'm very involved at the Florida Hospital Church, and they'll see me up front, and they'll see me at work, and if something goes on at work, you have to look that person in the eye or see them at Walmart. I live right there in Altamonte Springs. But the comforting fact is if you do the right thing for the right reasons, you have nothing to hide. You treat everybody fairly, Adventist or not. This is the process. If you have a concern, you could come to me or come to anybody on the team, and just being very transparent and fair, and that shouldn't be an issue. Yep. Anybody else? Yes, sir, over there.
In the community, Adventist Health System being a non-for-profit hospital, how does it differentiate itself from other for-profit hospitals in spreading the Christian message?
Okay. So interesting, good question. So to dissect that, because of our nonprofit status, all right, that simply means that a part of our revenue and income, our earnings, we're investing it right back into the community. Okay, so we are making money, so to understand that. But when it comes to our message in the community, that's kind of separate. So we know that when it comes to healthcare, we have the health message. We're focusing a lot of our energies on preventative health. We're focusing a lot of our message on let's keep people out of the hospital, and let's make sure that when they do come to the hospital, we're lowering their health rate. So a big goal for the last 5 years and for the next upcoming years, the goal is when you come to the hospital, how can we give you the lowest bill possible? Which is a lot different than a lot of our competitors who are saying, once you're in here, let's rack up the bill to charge insurance companies. And that's kind of going to help us out because the industry is changing because we have to do more with less. I saw a hand here. Yes, sir.
With you saying that the industry is changing, what potential departments do you see that are going to be implemented in the future?
All right, great question. Everyone hear that. So I say the industry is changing. What department I see being affected? All of it. All of them. So, for example, just high level, so the industry now is moving, a lot of hospital-based operations are moving to outpatient, where we're realizing that we could do things cheaper at an outpatient surgery center for like a hip replacement, knee replacement, than in the hospital. So, again, we're trying to bring healthcare, the cost down. So we're now, a patient is scheduling, hey, I want to get this procedure done. We are literally telling them, all right, don't do it here at the hospital. It'll charge you X amount. We have a surgery center right next door. Let me connect you and get that done. So we're not going to be growing hospitals as much in terms of towers and inpatient beds, but we're going to be growing other healthcare facilities like outpatient. So laboratory, you saw a laboratory in the hospital. We're going to have outpatient labs. Instead of imaging in the hospital, we're also going to have outpatient imaging centers. Again, that's going to bring the bills drastically down, and we're not going to grow as much on the inpatient side. Great question. All right, let me hold that because you have one. Any other questions first? I want to get someone else. Yes, sir.
So you talked a little about orthopedic surgery, and like, a big problem with orthopedic surgery is when the doctor has like too many tools and gets kickbacks from the companies that endorse them. So how would you have a conversation with a doctor who's getting these kickbacks that the hospitals be getting at? So it raises the price. So how do you have conversations like that?
All right. Well, I didn't say that, but you hit that is very, very real. So make sure I understand your question. How do I communicate with the physician that wants to use a certain type of instrument because they're getting a kickback because of their relationship? All right. So everyone to make sure they understand the question. That's actually a very real case. So we have physicians that are employed from the hospital, and we have independent physicians that are able to do their cases. But from a hospital, we supply the supplies. So for example, there are scopes that go into the body, and we have certain brands that we use. And we've, at the Adventist Health System, has said we're only going to use certain brands because we get a certain price point because of the volume in which we ordered. But some surgeons come in and say, you know what, I have a deal with Nike, and I'm not going to use your Reebok scopes. All right, I'm only going to use Nike. And this is real case. And we have to tell that physician, we are a Nike organization. And sometimes they threaten and say, if I don't get Reebok, I'm not going to do my surgeries here. So we have to have those transparent conversations. And it's easier when it's collective, and it's not because we like Nike because of how they feel. We made a decision as a company. And there's strength in numbers. And 9 out of 10, they understand that. Now, they may huff and puff and take their business elsewhere, but they realize we're doing the best thing. Again, we want lower costs for our patient, and patients matter first. Yeah. Yes?
What was your career path from your time as a
Career path, resident. Okay. So I was a resident, HR resident, and then I became a recruitment manager. Actually, one of the areas I shadowed, I ended up becoming a recruitment manager. From recruitment manager, I became the HR director at Florida Hospital Altamonte. From HR director, I took on a little more responsibility. I was the HR director and director of operations. So I had a dual role there. They didn't pay me for 2 roles. I just took on more work. Just saying that's a teaching point. They may give you more to do, to learn. They might not pay you more. And then from that, I realized that I was doing a lot more operations. And then I went on full director of operations. And then they bumped me up. And then I became a senior director of operations and vice president of operations. So kind of HR operations and just kept more responsibility. Yeah. There's a hand there, and I'll come back to that second hand. Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you talk briefly about your experience getting your master's and any advice you can have on that?
My master's, okay. So my master's was interesting because I started in Oklahoma when I realized, hey, I want to get into this. I like the business side of what I was doing. Honestly, the speaking every Saturday, that was kind of the easier part, but I had to run a church. And I'll be honest, I had a great time here at Southern, but when I had my first board meeting, I didn't know what to do. You know, I had to lean onto my head elder. You say, you take this one, all right? Then I had my church board meeting. My church board meeting, I had my school board meeting and my personnel committee meeting. So I really did it just to understand information. So when I did my master's, so I was working alongside of taking my master's. It was a great experience from the standpoint I learned a lot. And I was able to use the book knowledge and put into real case scenarios. And then I transitioned to another school in Orlando, Webster University, that worked very well with my work schedule. But what was the best advice I would give is to connect with your classmates while you do your master's, because they work in different industries, and how they take the information is going to be very, very different than how you use the information. But it's good to learn. So, for example, I had an individual who was getting her master's, and she was in the finance world working as an accountant, and she had desires to go into marketing. And she said, well, this is going to help me understand my customers better, work with my teammates, and grow from there. And I was a pastor working on my MBA, so that perspective was very, very helpful, and just understanding just the different people I may come in contact with. So I hope that answered your question. I had another hand that went up over here.
So as it seems like healthcare is moving more towards an outpatient, how's Adventist Health System, and you said you're developing new facilities and whatnot, how is Adventist Health System going to protect the way that the community works with private practice so that it doesn't dominate the doctors that are already there working in private practice, and so you don't destroy the revenue of the community?
Okay, great question. So just to make it plain, as we continue to grow, I'm going to make sure I understand your question. As we continue to grow on the outpatient side, how do we keep physician practice, private practices, still partners, or how do we work with them? Is that your question?
Yeah, how do you work with them and not just dominate their market?
Okay. So what we're doing right now is, as we're growing, we need private practice physicians to do well. So we kind of need each other here. So we are, every step of the planning process and strategy, we have private practice physicians at the table with us. So actually, some of the meetings I have to go to is I meet with physicians, and we have kind of section meetings, and we have division meetings together. And as we're sharing different strategies and ideas, the same thing about having empathy, before we execute these plans, we're putting it in front of the physicians. And they're giving us very honest feedback and saying, you know what, that sounds like a great idea, but that's not what's going to work. So we're trying to partner with them to understand that, because as these outpatient areas grow, the goal is that their business also picks up, because they'll have more options. Instead of just sending individuals to the hospital to get procedures done, they'll have more opportunities to spread out their patients that will hopefully bring more value to their practice. So that's our goal.
We have time for one more question.
One more. Going once. Going twice. Oh, yes.
Mine's not about the operations side. It's more how do your meetings go with physicians a lot? Because I know physicians are experts in a field, and that often translates to them thinking they're experts in business. How does that kind of whole conversation usually go down? How does that work?
Well, I mean, I have a cheat code because my dad's a doctor, all right? So I get a little more empathy on that side. And he was a doctor that went into business, and that they didn't know much about business. But you'll be surprised now. Physicians are educating themselves. So many of them are coming to the table. They've done their research. So the strategy that has worked well for myself and my peers is to just listen as much as possible. Just listen. Make sure before issues arise that we're sitting in front of them. Hey, Dr. Solomon, how are things going? And that's always opens up a can of worms. But I always like to walk around with a notepad and just jotting things down and trying to keep a record. And I'll be honest. Sometimes we are afraid. I've heard people are afraid to tell physicians no because they are physicians. But they've appreciated. They've told me when I told them the reality of that's not going to happen. We don't have $20 million to open up a new wing. Okay, but I'm happy to bring that to the right person. So listening, being very transparent, being real, being honest, saying, you know what, I know you would like, to have X amount of nurses on your case. We just can't afford that. And if we're going to stay open and take care of our business, we have to do what makes the most sense for our patients and from a viability standpoint. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.